Welcome to Reddit Corner. Today, we have a haunting tale from r/ghost stories, where a family moves into a new home. The house is clean, but the shed in the backyard is filled with containers of a water-like substance, each one scribbled on in a language no one recognizes. And when the substance is poured out and the containers disposed of, strange things begin to manifest. We hope you enjoy this one. Our first post is from Perpetual Connection. I'm not an easily frightened person. The older I've become, the less ghost and monster stories spook me. I've become more frightened of stories related to murderers and unlawful accidents. I'll still entertain a good ghost story, mostly because of what I saw as a kid. A lot of it I can write off as my parents' superstitions corrupting my childhood imagination and filling in the blanks on situations that could be easily written off with logic or investigation. But the things I saw and heard that couldn't be written off, not with any kind of explanation, those mess with me to this day. These are those stories. Believe them if you want to. They're true to me. A new house we moved into when I was 11 was normal enough, and the neighborhood was a step up from our last. It was ready to accept us, everything emptied and clean, all except for the shed in the back. After we were moved in, my dad wanted to move our gardening tools from the garage to the shed, but the shed was occupied. Every wall had sloppily built shelves, and each shelf was packed with all sorts of different containers: Gatorade bottles, milk jugs, mason jars, Sunny D, and every kind of cheap water-gallon brand you can think of. All of them were filled with water, and every single container was written on. I'm fluent in English and Spanish, but this was different. It was an indigenous dialect from Mexico, similar to Nahuatl, but my mother knows a little and claimed that it wasn't that. It was similar. Either way, we needed to move our stuff in, and the water had to go. I dumped them while my dad moved things in, and that was that. But that night, I had trouble sleeping. We had power but no cable, and this was before we even bothered with internet at the time, dial-up days. I had the Star Wars movie on DVD, and it was on the background while I played with my Game Boy. My TV was next to the doorway to my room, which made the dark hallway look pitch black. It was a little past 2 a.m. when I heard what I thought was my mom or dad in the hallway. I thought that because the footsteps were adult, too heavy to be my sister who was 6 at the time. The footsteps stopped at my doorway. I wasn't afraid because we were still unpacking and we'd been looking for this or that all day. Still, I looked at the door. From hip level, a bottle was tossed into my room. I know the difference between a fall and a toss. It was tossed. Still, I was unafraid. Why would I be? It was my mom or dad trying to get me to turn off my TV and go to sleep, right? I called out once, twice. By the third, I was terrified. My parents teased me sometimes, sure, but this wasn't in their gambit of tricks. I got up and went into their room. When I saw them sleeping and heard those noises, the sound of your breathing when you're asleep, noises you make that you can't mimic because you're not conscious while making them, the ones only your loved ones know. I shook my dad lightly and told him what happened. We went into my room and found a Gatorade bottle filled with water with the same scribbles on it. I slept on my parents' floor for a few nights. There's a whole host of other mildly terrifying things that happened in that house, but I can't explain someone throwing a bottle that we'd apparently missed out of the pitch dark. That happened. I saw it. There's no convincing me otherwise. It was either some paranormal stuff, or someone had been watching and knew exactly how to scare the crap out of me and broke in to do it. The other concrete memory is one that still gives me goosebumps as I write it out now. It was a school night. I remember because I had to miss school because of sleep loss the next day. I was doing homework, and I heard a faint sound coming from a small vent cover in my room. I couldn't make out what it was, but I got on all fours to listen. It was women, maybe half a dozen of them, chanting, praying. praying what I later learned to be Hail Mary in Spanish, over and over and over again, in that weird trance-like tone people don when they pray in unison. I later learned that this is done for the dead in Hispanic Catholic practices. I was so petrified, I couldn't really articulate to my mother why I needed her attention, but she could see that I was deathly serious. I told her to be quiet and listen, and I could tell that the noise caught her attention the way that it got me. Soon she was kneeling next to the vent cover listening, completely silent. What messes with me to this day is the expression on my mother's face. The metamorphosis from confusion and curiosity to horror and disbelief was too much. "See, I told you," I said in a tone louder than any sound I'd made in the last 5 minutes. Then I heard what sounded exactly like about half a dozen women saying, "Shh," all at once. We immediately got up to get my dad, but we were frantic with our explanation. All he understood was that there were intruders in the garage. He grabbed the shotgun and raced to the garage, which was only accessible through the driveway or backyard. The vent we were listening to shared a wall with it. I watched from the living room window. But there was nothing. No TV, no radio, and no women. That vent didn't lead anywhere else, and there wasn't any TV in the house playing anything like that. I heard them. I heard that prayer before I ever learned it in a church. Other people have said that the shh sound may have been a hissing from something in the vent, an animal maybe, or a piece of faulty equipment. No, it sounded like 6 women saying shh in different tones of voice. That happened. No one can tell me otherwise. I heard it. All of the other mildly little terrifying things I can explain away, but I saw that bottle thrown, and I heard those women. Our next post is from Eat Trash, Hail Satan. I used to drive for Uber and picked up a lot of very interesting passengers. This one, in particular, and I spoke of ghosts while I took him where he was going. This is what he told me. Also, I can't remember where he told me this took place, but I feel like it had been down in the hollers of either Kentucky or Tennessee. Here's a good rule of thumb. If someone tells you not to go in the basement, don't go in the basement. He told me of his grandparents' old house, where he saw an old woman standing in one of the upstairs windows a handful of times. The house was well over 100 years old, and stood by itself in the holler, as I said, and was very secluded. He said his grandmother was always walking around outside the house praying. He never asked why. He told me back in the early 1900s there was cult activity in the area, specifically where that house was. For a short period, some cult types lived in the house and somehow got a hold of his grandfather's sister. They kept her captive, tortured her, and used her for cult reasons. Eventually she died because of it. She was in her 30s when it happened, and his grandfather doesn't talk about her much. The grandparents moved back into the house and had to deal with the activity that went on there, and the basement was a place they didn't bother going. He said it was more of a dirt floor cellar. One of his brothers decided one time to go down there with some others. They all claim they saw a small black mass hanging from the bottom of the steps, and it had dull red eyes. It was instantly on his brother's back. When they all ran from the basement, the brother had claw marks and scratches all over his back. They never went back down there. So remember, kids, when someone gives you a warning like that, listen. He told me he could spend the night alone in the woods anywhere with no problem, but he always got chills just going by that house, even now, and it's no longer standing. Thank you for listening today. If you enjoy this content and want to hear more creepy stories like this, hit the like and subscribe buttons or follow the subscription link in the description below. Until next time.